Hey everyone! Connecting to databases and writing database queries is quite simple in Laravel. You just call a few methods on a Fluent API and Laravel will take care of opening the database connection, sending the queries, collecting the results, and giving it to your Laravel codebase. In this episode, we are going to look into database connections in Laravel beyond the basics. Now, there are many ways to perform database connections or to open database connections in PHP. In modern PHP, we use the PDO, which is an interface to interact with database connections. When you perform a database query in Laravel, Laravel is going to create a PDO or a PHP data object. And it's going to store this PDO, this instance, inside another instance called the Laravel database connection object. This database connection object lives as a singleton inside the Laravel container. Throughout the lifetime of a request coming to your server, Laravel is going to use the database connection object, that same database connection object, because it's a singleton. It's going to use this object to perform all the queries, meaning that each request needs to open a single database connection, and it's going to keep this connection open to run all queries until the request is terminated. In case the connection is lost, Laravel will attempt to reconnect or open a new connection behind the scenes. You don't have to worry about that. Now, we say that each request will open a new database connection and will terminate it after the request is handled. That's not the case, however, when using Octane. On Laravel Octane, a request or a database connection will open when a worker starts, and this same connection will be used to handle all the incoming requests to the worker. This saves a lot of server resources because opening database connections is quite expensive. The same case happens with queue workers. When a queue worker starts and a database query is run, the same connection that will be open is going to be stored in the worker memory, and the same connection will be used to perform queries on all the jobs the worker is going to handle. You can configure database connections in Laravel inside the database.php configuration file. You may define multiple connections, and each connection can have a different driver. Like if you use MySQL, you can use the MySQL driver, Postgres driver, SQL Server, and you can also use SQLite. Inside the database.php configuration file, you can also define the default connection, which is the connection that will be used by default to perform all queries. You can also run queries on a specific connection using the connection method. So if we use the DB facade to perform database queries, we can use the connection method to say that we want to perform this query on a connection called MySQL. We can do that also on eloquent models. Here we have a user model. It's an example model. We can use the on method to tell Laravel that we want to perform all queries on that model on this connection. You can also configure a model to always run queries against a specific connection. If we go to the model class, you can define a public property called connection, and you can set the connection that you want. Now it's all good. You have your database connections configured inside your Laravel applications, and you are performing queries like a boss. Your application is becoming very popular, you're receiving a lot of traffic, and then you notice that the database server is struggling. There are just too many connections open to the database. You can solve this by making the database server more powerful by adding more resources to the server, so can it open more connections and serve more customers. Or the other option, if you choose, is using database replication. The idea of database replications is that you have a main database instance that you use to write queries, and another or several other instances as secondary instances that are replicated or synchronized from the main database instance. All write queries are performed on the main database instance, and automatic synchronization between the main database instance and the secondary instances is done behind the scenes, and all read queries are sent to the read database instance. This will distribute read queries on multiple database instances, meaning that you can serve more customers because you can open more connections on multiple servers. Also, if one of the secondary databases fail for any reason, you have other database instances to send queries to. We are not going to look into database replication in detail in this video, but we are going to look into how to configure Laravel to work with database replication. Inside the database.php configuration file, you can configure different read and write connections. So let's remove the host here and then add a read attribute and pass an array. Inside this array, we are going to paste the host. And we are going to do the same with the write attribute. Here, host. Now you can configure different connections for the read queries and different connections for the write queries. You can also define an array of hosts for the read connection, and Laravel will choose a random one on every new database connection object that it creates. So instead of passing a single connection here, we are going to pass multiple hosts. So inside an array, now we have one host, and we can have another, and so on. Now for every worker process, Octane process, or PHP FPM request, Laravel will pick a random read instance from the list to perform read queries. If one instance is down, Laravel will automatically try to connect to another random connection until your database query is performed. If you research using replication a bit, you will hear the term replication lag. And it's basically when replication or synchronization between the main database instance and the secondary instances is delayed. When this happens, data that's written to the main database instance will not be available immediately on the secondary instances. Laravel's solution to this is by using the sticky option. So basically all you have to do is provide another parameter to the database configuration, and this parameter is called sticky, and you pass true. Now when you set the sticky option to true and you perform a query that writes to the database, this query of course is going to be performed on the right database connection. Followed by that, when you perform a read query on the same request inside the same request, Laravel, instead of using the read database connection to perform this read query, is going to use the write database connection. That way, data that you just wrote on the write database connection will be available to your read queries, because the read queries will be performing against the write database connection, which has the most recent changes. There is something very important that you need to know though. Switching to reading from the write connection will only happen inside the same request. If a new request comes in, a new database connection will open, and Laravel is going to send read database queries to the read database connection. However, for queue workers, the case is completely different. When you have the sticky option set to true and you perform a write query, Laravel is going to switch all read queries to be performed on the write database connection, even on all jobs. So you need to manually tell Laravel that you need to switch back to the original state after each job if you choose to do so. And to do that, you will go to the app service provider under the boot method, and you're going to use the queue facade called the looping method and pass a closure. This looping method will be executed by the worker between running jobs. So what we need to do here is that we need to tell the database manager in Laravel that between jobs you need to forget the record modification state. Now after running each job, Laravel is going to reset the database modification state, meaning that it will forget if you performed a write database query or not. Which means when the next job comes in, it's going to use the read database connection to perform read queries. You can also force queries on the read or write connection by appending read or write on the connection name while performing the query. So here we are performing a query against the MySQL database connection. We can say that perform this query on the write connection, and we can continue with the query as usual. Same with performing queries on an eloquent model. We can tell Laravel to use the write connection on the MySQL connection configuration for this model. So that's all I have for you today on database connections in Laravel. I hope you learned something. If you have any question, please leave them in the comments section down below or reach out to me on Twitter and I will do my best to answer all the questions. Thank you.